and mudslides in the Sounder North Corridor. And Joni, I think you wanted an opportunity to provide a quick update since our Operations Committee meeting was canceled.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Happy New Year. Welcome, everybody. As you know, we've had an unprecedented number of mudslides this winter, and our mudslide season typically runs between October and March, so we're only 3 months through this typical season, although it's not a typical season in terms of rainfall or the slides activity so far. The rainfall's been about 40% higher than average for the period from October 1st to December 31st. The slides have interrupted service for a total of 24 days since November 7th. So this is the second most impactful year, was 2005-2006 season when we had an interruption of 14 days. So we have through the, I don't know if this is through as of yesterday or not, but we've had about 288 scheduled trips have been canceled due to the slides. So the way we need to think about this and how we're trying to approach it, which is what I wanted to mention to the board. So we work very closely with Burlington Northern Santa Fe and DOT. The tracks and the right-of-way are owned by BNSF Railway. Sound Transit purchased 4 permanent easements for the right to operate. So we're like a lessee, basically, one way to look at it. So we really do predominantly rely on the property owner, BNSF, on this, and they're responsible to maintain the track and the area that it owns around the track. And despite many hours of cleanup and stabilization work performed by BNSF, the high level of rainfall continues to impact the corridor. Next week, there's a meeting with the Federal Railroad Administration, the DC and local folks, the DOT staff, BNSF, and us, and that's a meeting to continue work on slope stabilization plan using funding that DOT received from high-speed rail money. The way that we're approaching it, obviously, is safety first for our customers. The BNSF, their own protocols is if there's a slide, there's a 48-hour moratorium. We have made occasional decisions, and we made one this week, yesterday, where we could have, as of yesterday morning, run service possibly tomorrow afternoon, and we decided right off the bat not even to try to do that for Friday. So we're focused on both the reliability and the safety. So we're following it closely. We're doing our own due diligence. There's all sorts of research material that we've been looking at about what's happening on the Hill historically, what's happening now, and we're just continuing to stay really closely in touch with our eye on safety first. And we're looking at, we may have some recommendations to come back to the board with in the next week or two, and right now we're just trying to get some predictability for our customers and make sure that we've got buses ready when it happens, but whether we're going to make any wholesale changes yet in terms of our protocols, we're not sure. We're working very closely with DOT. Paula Hammond and I have been in communication, and we've got a conference call set up next Friday also to talk about it, because the Amtrak and intercity passenger services is impacted the identical way that Sounder passenger rail is. I think.
Questions of Joni?
Mr.
Julia?
Chair, I don't have I might have a question. I wanted to let you know that on my way to the meeting today, I had the radio on, and Dory Monson, his topic for the day is this subject. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I didn't know he was doing it today. I know he was earlier in the week.
And so he was, as usual, extremely, from my point of view, one-sided and critical, but I think it's important that we figure out a way to set the record straight on a couple of things that he's saying. First of all, he's saying that there's no public concern about the fact that the train isn't running, that not enough people are taking the train to care, and that there's no outcry or concern associated with the fact that the train is not running. That is something that I heard on the radio 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
And then the other thing that I heard is that the train carries approximately the same number of people as one articulated bus. That was the
That's
contention on
definitely
the
not true.
radio.
That would be 80 people.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what his numbers, whether or not it was per year that he was talking about, but I just think that there may be an opportunity for some damage control. And I'd like to talk to staff a little bit more about how we
Okay.
might do that.
Yeah, there has been, putting aside Dory Monson, there's been considerable media attention. Our media folks have been on the TVs all week. They've been stationed over at King Street and talking to passengers. I think if you're watching the news coverage, we're seeing and talking to our passengers. We have several of our employees that ride it, and I've been checking in with them to see how customers, what they're hearing, how customers are feeling about it. And it's why it's, from our perspective, it's not, it's first and foremost safety, but the second piece is reliability, because it's hard for people right now. You maybe take the train in the morning and then there's a mudslide, and so you cancel in the afternoon. So we're looking at our communication on this and how we can get more reliability in the meantime. But in terms of the customers, there's frustration about it, but there's great understanding about it, because this is a combination of Mother Nature, 100-year-old, 200-foot high cliffs. I mean, there's a lot of things going on there, and none of which is within Sound Transit's direct control. So, okay.
I just have a question. So, is this primarily a phenomena in the winter season
Yes.
that we experience?
And it just as an example, I think last year we had maybe 4 days impacted in all of last winter season. 2 years ago, we had a higher number. I think the 2010, 2011 was a high number, but we've never had a season since we've started running in that corridor like we've had this year. And the rainfall has been, like I said, it's 40% higher than it's been.
So knowing there are things we can't control, like Mother Nature and like the topography or the fact that becomes very destabilized, is there a strategy that we've talked about? And this would only serve the Sound Transit passengers, but have we ever looked at like just operating bus service during a certain window period of time? So during the winter, we operate buses, and then the rest of the year, we'll bring those trains. I mean, we had those kinds of just kind of little more out of the box thinking about, as opposed to just trying to just battle the day-to-day unpredictability that I think is probably causes a lot of consternation for a lot of folks.
We have not in the past thought about that, because we've never had the magnitude of what we've been dealing with now. But because of the magnitude, we have been looking. We've got our safety folks, our safety, security, QA folks that are looking at the data. Our operations people are looking at it, and they're supposed to be coming back to me in the next few days with any recommendations along those lines, which we would then touch base back with the board.
So from my perspective, there are a lot of different players in this. Amtrak, Sound Transit, Freight, Department of Transportation. And so what's not clear to me is when all of these folks get together, who runs the meeting? What's the purpose of the meeting? I'm sure it's hopefully to address that condition and how to provide more reliable service. I think it would be helpful to board members to understand a little bit about the purpose of getting all of these different agencies together, and some of the initial thoughts on how they would begin to address this problem.
Okay. And we will definitely be back. We were planning anyway to be back with the full report at the next month's operations committee, but we have the board meeting before that, and as things continue to happen, we'll be able to do that with the board.
Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I actually think our board member Erling was first. I'd be happy to wait, so.
Claudia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dave, and then Claudia, followed by Larry.
Well, thank you, Larry. I had a 45-minute presentation, so
Well, then I'll go first.
as you can imagine, the folks up north are pretty frustrated with this entire situation. I think maybe in Edmond, since we don't have many of the high cliffs that are causing the problem, it's additionally frustrating. That coupled with the fact that we have, on a temporary basis, 50 additional parking places, and on a longer-term basis, 100 car parking spaces. But, I mean, we realize that Sound Transit really doesn't have much to do with the repair and maintenance of the hillsides. I do hope that as a product of the conversation that Joni and I had earlier this morning, and she'll let me know about the coming meeting, that we can, take a look at all of the potential players too, as we know that the rainfall, the excessive rainfall, has caused a majority of the problem, but there are systems up on the cliffs that contribute to the problem too, for stormwater drainage. And I think we need to have, since Edmonds doesn't have many of those hillsides, I think we should talk to the folks in Everett and Mukilteo about how we can work with the communities to do a partial correction on that too. But just to close, the mayors of Mukilteo, Everett, and of course Edmonds are fully supportive of commuter rail. We think it's a great alternative. It was put in place in the beginning because it gave practical relief and another alternative for transportation. And the three of us support it completely.
Thank you, Dave. Claudia?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo a little bit what Board Member McCarthy was saying, because we've had a lot of discussion here about the ridership on the North Sounder, and done a lot, made a concerted effort to try to provide access, to increase the ridership, to make it more user-friendly so people will ride. But then disruptions obviously work against that, and so anything we can come up with that would be a predictable way of dealing with the unpredictability, so that a regular rider will know when something happens, I can do this instead, because that will keep them a regular rider, as opposed to making them change their mind that it's not reliable enough for them to stay on. So I just really support anything we can come up with that would be a normal sort of, bus routes have snow routes. Maybe we need a mudslide route. And the thing that we do every single time, and it's printed on the schedules, if there's a problem with service, you can do this instead. Just ways to make it easier for people to manage the situation as we're trying to fix the actual problem. Thank you.
Dave? Larry.
We'll get it straight yet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the risk of really getting Dory excited, let's talk about something that we shouldn't probably talk about, but we must as we move along here, and that's climate change and carbon loading. And are you looking at what's happening relative to this route and these hillsides and these slides in the context of weather and more severe weather and more rainfall, the rapidity with which we get these and the frequency with which we get these slides? I don't know if anybody's looking at that, but again, at the risk of raising this issue, it seems like we're starting to see, at least by observation, storms being much more severe around the country and causing havoc, not just for individuals, but for the infrastructure they rely on. So I think at least it's a question worth asking in terms of this particular route in this geography and the storms we're getting. And the second question is, it begs the question, if that's true, if we're getting more severe storms and these occurrences are happening more often, if we can't arrest carbon loading, can we at least adapt to it? And in that sense, are we inviting a safety issue, not just a service issue, but a safety issue with regard to our passenger service on this route? And in that sense, have we been playing a game somewhat of roulette? It hasn't happened yet. So those are two big questions. I don't know the answers to those, but I think at least in terms of as a carrier and a service provider, we ought to be asking ourselves about what's going on here and what we can do to protect our passengers, but also our investment.
Well stated. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none then, Joni, thanks for kicking off the discussion on that topic.
Can I just say, if I could just conclude on one thing from what Mr. Phillips said. Specific to climate change, I would say not yet at this point, but there is a lot of data. In fact, I saw a chart Mike Harbour was showing me earlier today of the predictability of what's happening and over 3 days versus 15 days and the percent of rainfall. So there's a ton of data that's been collected so far, and so what's happening with the weather and what it's doing to the ground, yes, there's lots of information, and we're looking at it because from my perspective as CEO, and we just had a conversation about this Tuesday, our leadership team meeting, the safety factor for me is number one issue. And we've had a lot of discussion in the last week in particular on the probabilities and all of that. And you think about, the video that's gotten everybody's attention to do with that freight train. Those are long, slow moving freight trains. Our trains are 3-car trains that come through much quicker. So there's lots of different probability factors. But if there were to be a slide right when a train was there, that's what keeps me up at night. So the safety issue is really first and foremost on how we're looking at this with our passengers. And then secondary to that is this reliability question, because you just cannot expect our commuters to have confidence in our system if you come in on train one half of the day and bus the other, or vice versa. So that's the one, an operations standpoint, that we're really looking at the protocols and how are we doing that.
Great, thank you.
Great, good discussion. Moving now, reports to the committee. We have one report today, that is the South 200th Link